Hello, I am back for another build video, this time with the Bard DPS. So I'm just going to jump right into it, starting with our AoE loadouts, or loadout. I really only have two loadouts now that I'm using, AoE and single target, and I'm also using dragons. I haven't rebuilt any of these other loadouts yet, and I don't really plan on it, I don't think. So just AoE, single target, and dragons, which I'll get to. So starting with AoE, I'm still using this Crit Strike helmet. I prefer this over the Combat Advantage one, and also I don't even have the Combat Advantage one either way. But I just prefer this one because I like having my stats right there rather than having to wait for 50 seconds for it. Second, I have this chest plate. This one's of course MLMD. For all DPS is generally what you use, except for maybe a few characters. We're using these arms for AoE. My crit severity and crit strike are 5% undercapped with an AoE with the watermelon sorbet. Squash soup they're capped, but I have switched from squash soup to watermelon on this character for a little bit extra stat potentiality. And then this will just give me a little bit of crit severity and AoE. Weapons, I'm using the Starcore ones, or Solarium. These are from MDM, of course. And these arms are from the first boss farm in MDS. These boots I'm also using for the accuracy rating. You can just buy these in the seal. You have to be in a party, which of course you're going to be in a party. And then our neck and waist, we're using the detector stuff still with the portable spelljammer artifact. And then I'm using this power ring. This is from MIC, and you can upgrade it to legendary and mythic as well for 400 extra total item level, but I just haven't done that yet. And then I'm using this ring from ADM. You can just farm it with the farm invasions and stuff to get it for the accuracy. And then the shirt, we're still using the 5% combat advantage one. You can just buy it in the auction house or farm it from the little mini bosses in Dragonbone Vale. And then of course we're using these pants. I'm using the combat advantage crit severity ones. They're from the chest in MDS. And these pants I think are the best rating wise pants that you can get, because the other ones are 2500 accuracy, which is the second best I think, and then 1500 combat advantage, and it's like 1000 less ratings if you use those. So these ones are these ones, but I prefer these ones I think overall. So that's what I'm using. And then artifacts, AoE, I'm just using this as the primary. It'll help with debuffing mobs, and also it does a little bit of damage. It's not very much damage. I think each meteor only hits for like maybe 50 or 60,000, but it's pretty decent. And then our secondary artifacts, I got the blood brass pistol again, and then I got this music box, which is unbound, so I just move it between characters when I need to. And the blood brass pistol you can just farm from the newest campaign. It's really easy. Probably takes like 30 minutes maybe, farming mini bosses. And this one of course comes from one of the lockboxes last mod I think. Enchantments, just using first stuff for stats, so I'm using a couple split enchantments. This one is kind of interesting, but there's not really much to say about this. Of course, Garnet utility. And we're using Rage of Flames and Devil's Precision still, Lightning Flash, Movement Speed, and AoE. And then, of course, I'm using Strength and Dexterity here for the two attributes. Now we'll look at boons. So for boons, I'm using these four for the Master Boons is the most important thing. And then tier 5s, I'm using these two, Action Point Gain and Forte. Of course, all of the power and offensive stat ones, all of the health. And then I also went into Fiends and a little bit into Undead with the extra points I had. And then of course movement speed is important as well. And if I had more points I would spend it in the rest in Undead, and then also max out Cultists. And then maybe go into like lingering medicine for the extra heal over times that you get with it. Guild Stronghold, we just have power, defense, and movement speed for the AoE loadout. And then Companions, I haven't quite finished yet. I need to wait until next week, but Summon, we have Cold Light Walker since it's pretty strong for AoE. It's overtuned a little bit, but I hope they don't decrease it because it's not like AoE companions destroy mobs anyway. Even though he's stronger, he still doesn't do that much damage compared to other ones. I'm using Combat Advantage, Crit Severity, Mount Hotenow stuff, so I still need one more that I can get next week. So that'll be 400 extra item level there. Acute Senses for the Companion Enhancement, and the Combat or Companion Enchantment is, of course, maxed out. And then for AoE, I'm using Drist instead of Batiri. Golden Cat is the utility, and then Neverwinter Night Midskin Raptor, of course. And then now for mounts. So I'm using the Guppies. This is from a lockbox. It seems to do 700 magnitude every second that it procs, which it procs like maybe once a second or something, like 3 or 4 times. And it dazes them as well. So it's just incredibly strong. It does a lot more damage than any of the other ones that I've noticed. I'm using Dominant Force for the ratings. And then stable, I'm using 2 Executioners, 1 Menders, 1 Gladguile, and 1 Enchanter's Hex. Gladguile specifically for the AoE loadout so I can move faster. And then of course all of our collars are movement speed, stamina gain, rough AD, crit sev, and encounter power damage. And insignias are just a mix of, you know, what I need for balancing. So generally the best ones to go for are brutalities, precisions maybe, and skills and aggressions as well sometimes. I don't have any aggressions right now though, at least in this loadout. And it's pretty much everything for AoE, so I'll switch to single target real quick and just, you know, show any of the changes that I make. So in single target, I switch over to these arms for the extra crit strike and forte. Of course, I'm using these weapons instead of Solarium because they can proc up in a longer fight like in bosses. I also switched the primary to Crystal, but you could use, you know, whatever you need to debuff. So Crystal's good, Meteor's good, Marco is good, Demo's good, Mythalar, Dragonbone Blades. The ones you don't want to use are Grace of Pelor, Marilith Mask, Tentacle Rod. You don't want to use those garbage ones because they give less than 10%, so it's really not very good. And I hate seeing people use those artifacts. You could also use this portable Spelljammer as 10%. Definitely don't use this as the primary unless you're in the new dungeon. I hate seeing people use this and outside of the new dungeon. It's very annoying. Everything else on the right side is the same. Enchantments are maybe a little bit different for stat balancing, but it's, you know, mostly the same again. Same attributes and everything. Boons, I switch over to Revive Sickness. In case I die, it'd be more helpful. Crit Severity. Campaign Boons, pretty much exactly the same as far as I can tell. And I wouldn't change anything either way. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention, so for your bonus enchantment, you can use movement speed or AP gain. I just like movement speeds because I'm really slow without it in this loadout, so I prefer to keep that. Companions, your primary, the main ones you want to use are Drist, Flapjack, Portobello, Tutor, Spine Devil, or Scorpion. Generally, you want to have as your 5 companions in the group Black Death Scorpion, Drist, Flapjack, Portobello, and Tutor. And if it's just a pure single target, like the first or second boss, or well, first or third boss at least in Demon Web Pits, then you can switch this Drist over to a Spine Devil instead and maybe get a little bit extra damage. But generally Drist is better because it's 100% uptime, plus it works on all enemies rather than just the one that it hits. Equipment the same and acute senses still. And then I switch, like I said, I switched that Drist over to Batiri. And that's just simply to make up the stat loss from not having these weapons equipped. That's the reason why I do that. And then for mounts, I switched to Bigby's Hand. So Bigby's Hand is the only strength mount that exists right now, and since you generally want to go into strength as a bard, it will deal the most amount of damage because it procs, or it deals extra damage based off of your strength modifier, which you can see in the stat list here at the bottom. So for physical damage we have 6.2% and magical's 2.7, so depending on how many buffs and how much damage it does, it could deal as much as like an extra 1,000,000 damage for the Bigby's Hand. If it's dealing a lot of damage like in Trials. And then Dominant Force. And then for this I just switched the Gladiator's Guile over to a Tactician's Precision. It really helps in artifact calls because you can proc all of your encounters first before artifacts and then proc them again during artifacts, so it's really nice. And that's pretty much everything I switch as far as I can tell. So the only things that I plan to upgrade with this build is I plan to maybe eventually upgrade this ring up to Mythic, but that will take like 5 weeks probably. And I plan to upgrade this last piece of companion gear next week. So that's only 800 extra item level. So look at buffs. So I have 17 minutes on Sunlords, which is of course one of the buffs I use. I use this Spider Totem, and then I use Flask of Potency and Watermelon. And I've also started using Ratatouille for the extra accuracy. And I've noticed that Guildmark farming is way easier now since you can donate to your guild since they increase the caps a lot more, so it's a lot easier to get that guild food. So if I look at my stats, my accuracy goes up by 2.25k with Mystic, and it goes up by 10k with the boots procced because of when I'm in a party. So that caps it out to the green. My power goes up to like 94% just about, with those two auras. And I'll do a stat add up in a little bit, but let me first just go over the power list. So I'll start with AoE just to make it a little bit simpler. So in AoE, I'm using Duet and Contra as the primary two AoE powers. The third one I'm using Ad Libitum. You could switch this to Volti Subito, but it's a little bit tedious, especially with how laggy the game is now. You probably mess it up, because essentially it dashes you, but you can jump and dash, and it doesn't dash you, and it still does the damage. So that's the strategy for it, but it's just tedious to do that, so I just don't worry about it. I mean, and it's only 300 magnitude damage on top of that, so it's pretty small. But let me switch that back. At-wills are the same in both loadouts, Staccato and Con Elemento. Then we're using Lore as our pretty much only daily that we use. We don't really ever use anything in AoE. Our songs, I just have Blaze, Tailwind, and Ballad pinned, which means that they're the ones that are not in quick play. And then I just have Ballad of the Witch in quick play to make it easier to play it rather than having to play it while I'm walking or whatever, which is hard to do on console because of the button combinations with it. Mystifying Strikes and Master Performance, and we use those same on single target as well. The first feat doesn't matter at all. You can choose either one. I mean, you could do Voice Throw, but I think that was bugged before. I'm not sure if they fixed it or not. So I just use this one. And then the second feat, I use Elemental Medley. This makes it to where whenever you play one of the at-will changing songs, which is Blaze Flamenco, Tailwind Mambo, and Steel March, when you at-will the target, it will increase your or increase your damage bonus by 10 magnitude for all of your for the song. So if you notice, yeah, so it just does an extra 10 magnitude on every hit basically, and then that stacks up to 3 times for all 3 of the songs that you have, and you can reproc it within that 60-second window and it will refresh the timer. So you generally want to use, you know, either Steel March or Tailwind before the fight. And then when it's about 20 seconds and about to run out, like 20-second timer on the song, you want to play a different one. And then make sure you at-will the target so that you can proc that bonus. And then the third one, you want to play, you know, the third one, Blaze Flamenco or whatever it is. And it will... and I think generally if you want to maximize your damage, you want to use either Steel March or Tailwind in the first artifact call before you enter the fight. And then the second song you play is Blaze Flamenco. And then the third one that you play is Steel March or Tailwind Mambo again, so that you have that backup for the next artifact call. And you can benefit from your physical damage bonus with your attributes. As I mentioned before, the physical damage in the stat page, because Blaze Flamenco changes your damage to magical. And so you technically lose a little bit of damage if you do that, but then you gain more damage overall with the feat itself. So that's how it works. It's a little bit complicated and hard to explain, but the main thing is just to replay a different song and at-will the target every whenever your song's about 20 seconds left on the timer, roughly. The third feat I use a do in all my loadouts now, just because of the damage resistance more than anything. Ballad Calavoce is technically better to use, but I don't know. I just prefer the damage resistance with this, with our deflex severity forte. It does give you 10% damage. It's a little bit selfish, but whereas this gives 5% damage for the whole group. But it's so hard to survive with deflex severity forte. So using this instead really helps survive something that one-shots you that you can't control anything about. And then martial performance, this one's simple. It's basically whenever you play one of these 3 songs, Tailwind, Steel March, or Blaze Flamenco, it does an initial hit for 350 magnitude, as you can see at the top, and you have to stand close to targets. And if the targets get hit by that initial hit, then you get an additional 10 magnitude on your attacks, which is encounter powers and at-wills and everything. So if you add all of these together, you get 10 plus 40 when this is fully stacked. So that gives you 40 extra magnitude on all of your hits, which is just a passive thing. Now this one is mostly always going to be up because it's really easy to proc, but this one is obviously you have to stack it up, and unfortunately when it fully stacks with 3 songs, you have to wait for it to run out before you're able to stack it again, because it only allows you to stack it the 3 times, and you can't refresh it with a different song if you play a different song for the 4th time. You have to wait for it to cool down. So it's a little bit annoying that that's the case, but it's definitely better than Battlefield Ostinato. And then the last one, we're still using performance. This is just this gives the improvised encounters, but I'll just switch over to my single target and go over sort of the powers here as well. So for everything is the same except the encounter powers I switch. I'm still using Ad Libitum like I explained, but I'm also using Dancing Lights and Lunge. Dancing Lights does a daze on the target as well, so it's really nice for like the second boss in MLMD, or I think the demos you can also stun them with it. It lasts for 3 seconds too. But I'll just go over. So before I enter the fight, I play either Steel March, which is that one, or I play Tailwind Mambo, and then summon the target, and make sure you proc your 10 magnitude with the at-will, and then use all your encounters, use your artifact, use your daily, and then that will refresh your cooldowns by a little bit. Bigby's hand, and then just basically mash your encounters over and over again. I forgot to mention, I messed it up, so before you pop artifacts, like right before, you want to make sure to play Ballad of the Hero. So it'll give you 85 extra magnitude on all of your at-wills and encounters and everything, which basically if you proc that together with these two, that'll give you 20 extra magnitude on top of that. So that's 105 magnitude extra on every encounter and every at-will. And of course your at-will is already 120 magnitude with a 0.5 second cooldown. So it's 225 now, basically. So let me just go over the artifact again since I messed it up. So you start outside of the fight by playing that song, and then when you go into the fight, you want to proc your at-will, use all of your encounters, use your Bout of the Hero, artifact, daily to refresh your stuff, and then just attack for a little bit, and then use Bigby's hand, and then just keep attacking. And then once your little timer over there on the left reaches about 2 or 3 seconds or so, press R1 again, at least for console, to cancel it. And then you play it again, and then you just keep attacking. And once again, wait for that to reach about 3 seconds or so. And once it reaches down, cancel it again, and now we'll play Blaze Flamenco in the middle of the artifact call. And then basically just keep going through, and once your performance gets back up, you can play Ballad of the Hero again, and just keep attacking. And then we have artifacts back up. It really depends on the timer whether or not you want to use Blaze Flamenco, and it depends on the boss, because you don't always use artifacts on the boss, like as soon as they come off cooldown. So depending on that affects whether you use Blaze Flamenco or if you reproc another physical song, because these songs last for 72 seconds, and the thing here lasts for 60 seconds. So that's why it's generally good practice to replay another song in about 20 seconds. And if you want to be lazy about it, then you can just worry about 2 stacks instead of trying to get all 3. And 2 just means that you just basically switch back and forth between these 2 songs over and over again, and just don't worry about Blaze Flamenco. That's generally what I do. I usually don't worry about Blaze because it's too much of a hassle, and you might have a damage loss with it either way, because if you play it like during artifact calls, you would have a damage loss because you don't have you have the magical damage proccing instead of the physical. So I generally recommend just to use these 2 songs and switch back and forth. Just make sure you at-will every time you do it. I usually at-will about every 40 seconds or so with Con Elemento, just to make sure I reproc it if I need to, if it ran out or whatever. And I mean that's pretty much it for that. But I will go over the stats now. Let me make sure I have 4 minutes left. Okay. Another thing to note is I have the Mythic Dragon down here. I don't have an owlbear. That's what I would use instead. Because the hawk and the dragonfire are not worth the cast time of them, because they take forever to go off. So I generally just use this for action point gain, and then I can just keep it on for dragon fights. But the owlbear would be what you want to use, and you use owlbear like right when you use your Bigby's hand, and proc them both together. But let me just go over my stats, and I'll show kind of what stats I have. So I use 5% sorbet, If you use 10% sorbet instead, then you're capped on everything. But with 5%, so I gain 12,000 accuracy rating with the boots and mystic aura, so that puts me up to 68,000. And then I gain 7.5% with this, so that puts me up to, or 68,000, not 78. So 68,000 plus 7.5, so that puts me up to like 65, or 75 to 76. And then I gain the extra 10,000 or 10% from this. So that puts me up to about 86-ish% is what I got up to when I was checking it. And then combat advantage, I gain 3.5% from Portobello, so that puts me up to 86%. And then I gain 10% with Flapjack and Tutor, so that's 96%. And then I gain 7.5% plus 7% from those two. So what is that? That's about 90. It's about 110%. And then I gain the extra 9% from this. So I proc up to 119.5% is what I get, which is close enough. And then for crit strike, I get 5% from the weapons and 10% from the helmet. So I go up to 71 plus 10, and that's 81. And then I get the extra 10% from lightning flash, so that's basically 90%. Maybe like 0.5% under, I don't remember. And then crit severity, I gain 5% from the weapons, so that's 100%. 10% from the bard feature, so there's a mechanic where when you play a song not in a quick play for 20 seconds, you gain 10% crit severity, which should have just about 100% uptime. So that's 100%, 110%. And then I gain 9% from these pants whenever they're procced, which is not amazing uptime depending on your healer, but it's pretty good uptime, at least in trials. And that's like 119% is where I proc up to roughly. And then for power, so I gain 4.5k from the two auras, so that puts me up to like 94%. And then I gain 3.5% from Portobello, so that's 97.5%. I gain 3.5% from this, from the Forte, so that's like 101% or 100%. And then I gain 18% from the Raptors, so that puts me up to like 118 to 19%. And then if I fully cap out, I can cap out with the Blessed Advantage. And then, like I said, if you wanted to, you could use 10% sorbet instead of 5%, and that would get you accuracy to 90, and power would definitely be at 90. It would be a little bit overcapped, actually. And that's everything. So accuracy is just 4% undercapped without 10% sorbet, but everything else is, right on, close enough at least, or right on the number. So my buff just ran out there. And if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments and I'll try to answer. And as usual, I just kind of ramble on, so without a script. So hopefully I was clear in my explanations for the most part. But just leave comments if you have anything that I didn't mention, or if there's something you're curious about, I might be able to answer. And thanks for watching.